Okay, I'm going to do a real quick little video showing how I do some of the shading for the little characters. And for the most part, I use ink pads, especially around most of the edges, but I do use chalks and whatnot for the face. And I'll show that in a separate little spot on here. But all I do is I like the cat's eye chalk mostly because they don't have quite so much ink on them. And I just kind of rub the chalk pad around the edges of the paper. And if you're doing it for the first time, if you've never chalked before, I would suggest trying it on the back side. It's a good way to test out like how much pressure you want to apply, and also to check and see if your ink pad might be a little too wet. I'm going to show you one ink pad I have that I wouldn't use. This is a blue, but I'll show you why. These are just so heavily inked that you can tell right off the bat, you know, this type wouldn't work, even though I know it's blue on beige, but it's just way too heavy and too wet. So that's one of the reasons why I prefer to use the teardrop, or the dewdrop, I guess what's it called, and it's the Versa Magic. So anyway, for the dark gray paper, I used the Niagra Mist, but any type of a lighter color. On this dark, because I'm using a darker paper, whether it's the dark gray or the black, I tend to go with a lighter shade of gray, or this one I think has a hint of green to it. However, now when I'm doing the hair on the brown, I want a little darker along the edges, so I'm using a darker ink pad, and this one I've had forever, so it doesn't over ink the edges. And just like the others, I just kind of go around and rub down along the edges, and you do it at a bit of an angle there too. Okay, and that's the hair, and for that one I use the color box. It's called Mini Chestnut. On the white, this is a background piece of white, and it's not going to need any shading because it's going to be pretty much covered up by the time I'm putting everything together. On the white, sometimes you can use a blue, but because this is an autumn piece, I think I prefer to use a lighter color. So I'm kind of using a cream beigey ink pad for this one. Same thing, just kind of go around the edges. And that gets all the little whites. These are going to be, this is the face and these are the two hands. For that one, I'm using a little lighter brown. This is called Sahara Sand by Versa Magic. And again, I just lightly on this one because this is a little darker than the skin tone, so I'm using a really light pressure. It doesn't take much when you're doing around the facial things. And on this one, this is the bottom of the face, the chin, so I'll be doing along there. And I won't need to do up around this part because this is going to be covered with her hair and with her little hat. So, and then, oh yeah, we have this little guy, the pumpkin pie. I think I'm going to use the dark brown on that one too. Just giving it a little depth. And this is the pie plate, so you could go a little dark on that one too. No, you just use that one that I used for the gray. And of course you're going to get ink all over your fingers, but that's okay, you can wash it off. Okay, now when I switch to chalking her face, sometimes if it's easier, you can put like this on this one. I would probably go ahead and have the hair on there just temporarily. I'm not going to glue it down, but that just gives me an idea of where her hair is at. So when I go to put her eyes on, I don't get them too far up under the bangs. And the first thing we're going to put on is the whites of her eyes. And with those, I'm probably going to shade this time with the blue. Go around the edges. And if you like to shade around the eyes, there's two ways you can go. You can either shade up before you glue your eyes down, or you could do it after. On the Pumpkin Boy, what I did afterward is I actually used my Copic marker and just kind of drew a real thin line around the outside of the eyes. That's quick and easy. If you want to use chalk, best thing to do is put your eyes there kind of loosely, and then I just kind of mark it real quick, real lightly with a pencil. A little dot there and there, so you kind of know where the eye is at, and that way you make the shading big enough around it. Okay, this is where I switched to using my chalks, and I've just got a box of chalks. You can use daubers, are one method, and the daubers could actually be used with the ink pads too, but for these, I know some people use the makeup brushes. I just use the Q-tips. And the first thing I'd probably do is her cheeks, and so I'm going to just rub the Q-tip along on the red. Got to make sure I don't pick up that brown. I'm going to put a little bit of blush down around the bottoms of the cheeks here, so and that just gives it a light deal. And then you can still see where I've got those marks for her eyes. With that one, I'll use a different Q-tip, and then I'm going to use the brown on my chalk. And then I'm just going to really lightly add a little bit of shading, so that when you put the eyeball down, gives it a little depth around the eyeball, like it's sunk in a little bit. So, and like I said, this is doing it differently than what I did with him. I used the pen for him. And we'll just end up gluing the eye on. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and glue this eye on. And getting the eye placement on your characters is really important. It kind of gives that whole expression to the face. It depends on where you place the eyes. And typically, too, on little kid faces, they're going to be, probably midway. This would be the top of her head and the bottom. You're going to have it at least midway, if not a little bit down from the middle. So like this, when we put the hair back on, then it looks about right. So we'll get her little eyeballs on there, and then I'm going to put two tiny little dots of glue on the whites of the eyes. This is a whole lot easier than putting it on the back of the black. I stab my eyeball with an X-Acto knife. This is just the way I like to do it. And place it on there. And give it a few seconds to dry. Yeah, I'm probably going to move her eye just a tad. Let it push it down and let it dry. And she's got a little nose. So before I put her nose on, I'm going to put a dot of glue. And again, the placement of the nose is going to make a difference. I like to put it right at the bottom of the eye. So right there, I'm just putting a tiny little dab of glue. It doesn't take much. Glue's still wet, so I can put it on there. There we go. Now, I'm taking just a fine tip marker and going to give her some eyelashes. I put my pen down right at the edge of the whites of the eye and then flick the pen up. And again, if you want to practice on something else, that wouldn't be a bad idea if you haven't done it before. It doesn't have to be real exact. And I'm going to give her a tiny little eyebrow right above. And then underneath here, probably about halfway between the nose and the bottom of the chin, just a small little U-shaped smile there, and tiny little thing on the corners of the mouth. So tiny one has an underneath. And that gives her eyes some depth. Okay, now we're going to start putting this together. And for the little Pilgrim girl, the first thing that you're going to apply is going to be the dress. And that goes up, and you can line up right along all the edges and whatnot on this blackout piece. That helps you determine where each piece is going to go. And then we're going to do her little arms. That actually could have gone underneath. Okay. And on this one, you'll see there's this tiny little bit of white underneath. There's that's where the cuff for her dress is going to go. So put on the other sleeve. Again, it could have been slipped underneath there. And same on this side, there's going to be a little bit of a white piece right here where the cuff is going to go. And then we put on her collar. And right here and over here, that's where the collar is going to line up. Okay, now that the collar is on, we will do the top of the apron. And I'm going to put that right at the base of her waist right there. And it's centered right on the piece. And then the belt goes on the apron. Okay, next I'm going to do her cuffs, and those are going to go, oops, I got an extra little nose there. They go this way. The cuff is going to line up where that one little piece is, right along there. Whoops. Yeah, having that blackout piece is really nice, being able to figure out where all the parts and pieces go. Same over here. So I think I'll move on to her feet first, and then put first the sole of the shoe. Again, using the blackout, the blackout piece behind. Line the sole of the shoe up there. And then we're going to do the top of the shoe. You'll notice on the shoes, the one side is a little higher than the other, and this is the outside of the shoe. So it's going to go on this side, and just kind of line it there. And now I'm going to work on the top of her head, and now we're ready to put first the hair layer. Again, we've got the curls on here with the curls on the blackout piece, so I'll just get that all lined up, that down firmly, and then we can add her little face. And the chin is going to line up at the bottom of this piece on the hair and along the top of the head. And lastly, on this, we're going to add her bangs. Okay, we're going to do this little hat trim again because I realized I had inked the wrong side. There actually is a front side and a back side. These are just slightly different measurements, and so make sure you've got the right side when you're going to put it on. Otherwise, you're going to run into the problem I did. It didn't fit. So, okay, now we got her little hat brim ready. And this time it should work. There we go. Yeah, so now when it's lining up, it's going to line up around her face and there too. So, good deal. So there she's that far. And now we'll put the pie together. Put the pie plate on first onto this background layer for the pie. That goes on first, and then the pie crust. I'm trying to make this look like a pumpkin pie so that the background is a little more orangey. You could do it a lighter brown if you wanted to do like an apple pie, but I'm trying to make it look more like a pumpkin pie. So then I put that pie crust on there. And now it should look like a pumpkin pie. And I'm going to put this on here. Let's get that little bit of whip. And I think on this one I'm going to add the blue ink around the edges, just a tiny bit. Put that on the top of the pie. And the other thing we could do, now her hands are going to go on here, and she's going to be holding the pie. I could go ahead and put her hands on first and then pop dot the pie. I think I'll do that. So just get her little hands on. Okay, and then the other hand. And then I'm just going to grab some pop dots here for the back of the pie. Put the pie on there. And there we have it. Our two little pilgrims. Happy Thanksgiving.